This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Friday, May 14th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. Eid al-Fitr is a special time of the year for nearly half of Africa's population who are adherents of Islam. But this year's celebration hit different amid a continuing pandemic and the devastation it has caused across the continent. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
Eid is a special holiday in the Muslim calendar, a sacred celebration of family and food after a month of fasting and prayer. Last year's festival was overshadowed by lockdowns and pandemic restrictions worldwide. Some of the same restrictions are in place this year, says Sheikh Mohammed of Nairobi's prominent JAMIA mosque, but they have adapted.
And this is a great challenge. But despite that, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this year we are able to pray together the last 10 days of Ramadan, and also today, Eid al-Fitr, we have celebrated or prayed together as a community.
Congregants agree.
For now, it's very difficult. I can just say maybe to the world, to my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, wherever they are, as we take care, as we celebrate this holiday, let's put in consideration the government regulations, the world regulations, whatever, so that we can keep safe.
In this multi-ethnic nation, Yusuf Mohammed, head of the South Africa branch of global charity Islamic Relief, says this year's Festival of Light will go on after a harsh lockdown dimmed last year's celebrations.
We look forward to being able to attend the mosque, our normal prayers, although with the necessary protocols in place. So this year, we're excited.
The festival is also a time to practice the deeply spiritual value of zakat, giving alms to the less fortunate. That value has been vaulted to the front this year as Islamic Relief has stepped up to provide food parcels to those in need, and not just fellow Muslims. He says the charity sees a bump in donations during Ramadan.
Throughout Africa, you find communities that are experiencing extremely trying times, which has only been exacerbated by the pandemic and the ensuing lockdowns in many of these countries. So we find, because of Islamic Relief having a presence globally in over 40 countries around the world, in Africa, especially in Western and Eastern Africa, countries such as Niger, Chad, Mali, Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, all of these countries is an increased need.
The Ramadan fast is normally broken by the eating of dates, per Muslim tradition. But this year is bittersweet, says South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who joined a recent iftar in Cape Town.
As this sacred month draws to a close, I want to call on the Muslim community to join hands with us, in the national recovery and reconstruction effort, as we rebuild our economy, as we work together to reposition our country.
That hope is echoed from Senegal to Kenya to Ethiopia to South Africa as millions mark the end of this holy month. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Officers fired tear gas and warning shots to disperse crowds as rival Muslim groups clashed during Eid celebrations on Thursday in Congo's capital, Kinshasa. Members of two opposing camps vying for leadership positions in Congo's Muslim community sparred outside Kinshasa's Martyrs Stadium on Thursday morning, where they had planned to worship together as a demonstration of unity. Video showed large groups swarming to a small stage next to the stadium before being dispersed by tear gas and police vehicle driving through the crowds. A police car on fire was also caught on camera near the stadium. A police officer in Congo's capital, Kinshasa, was beaten to death and 46 others were wounded during the clashes, according to a police spokesman. A South African report into excess deaths over the past year suggests more than 133,000 people in the country have died from COVID-19, far more than the official tally of nearly 55,000. Soraya Ali of Reuters reports.
A report in South Africa suggests that the country's death toll from coronavirus may be over twice as big as the government's official tally and could place it into the top 5 worst hit places on Earth. The South African Medical Research Council, or SAMRC, has been monitoring excess deaths there since May 2020. That means comparing how many people would be normally estimated to die in a population over a specific time frame, be it from accidents or natural causes or other reasons, with how many actual deaths were logged. In its latest report, published on Wednesday, the SAMRC said South Africa had seen over 133,000 excess deaths, which they believe are COVID-related in the past 12 months. That's 78,000 higher than the official toll of around 55,000. South Africa implemented one of the world's most restrictive lockdowns from March 2020, when cases were still relatively low. The SAMRC said increases in weekly deaths due to the pandemic only became evident from May 2020 onwards. Excess death figures surpass official COVID-19 death figures in many countries. Some epidemiologists say looking at excess deaths is the best way to measure the true toll of COVID-19, given that counting methods vary between countries. The Health Ministry declined to comment immediately on the report.
That report was by Soraya Ali of Reuters. At least 17 African migrants drowned in a shipwreck off Tunis as they tried to cross the Mediterranean from Libya to Italy, according to Tunisian Red Crescent. The Tunisian Coast Guard rescued 2 Nigerian women in waters off the southern town of Zarzis. The ship started on Sunday from Zawiya in Libya with 19 migrants on board. Last month, at least 40 migrants drowned off Tunisia's port of Sfax, south of Tunis. The United Nations estimates that 633 people have died or gone missing on the way this year as they try to get to Europe. Kenya's High Court ruled on Thursday that a drive by President Uhuru Kenyatta to change the constitution was illegal, stopping what his critics have called a political move designed to check his deputy William Ruto, whom he has fallen out with publicly. Parliament has already passed the proposed amendments, popularly known as the Building Bridges Initiative, which mark the biggest change to the East African nation's government structure since a new constitution was adopted in 2010. But issuing a ruling on several challenges lodged by various parties, a 5-judge bench of the court said Kenyatta had used a constitutional provision reserved for citizens to initiate the changes, making the process illegal. Kenya's 1,500-meter world champion Timothy Cheruiyot has been struggling to keep a consistent training schedule in a topsy-turvy year as he prepares for this summer's Olympic Games scheduled in Tokyo. Nazanin Moshiri of Reuters reports.
Running on a track under the Nairobi sun, Kenya's top athletes train ahead of trials for the Tokyo Olympics. Among them is 1,500-meter world champion Timothy Cheruiyot. He was one of the top contenders for an Olympic gold in Japan after winning the world title in Doha in 2019. But when the Games were postponed amid the COVID-19 pandemic, he had to adjust his way of working.
When we go to races, we normally go and there and train, but now you are going there and stay in the room. It's a bit challenging, yeah.
The team of around a dozen athletes is under the care of coach Bernard Uma. He checks in on Cheruiyot to see how his 3 younger siblings and parents who are farmers in Western Kenya are doing. Mostly, he wants to build his mental resilience.
You've seen how we were training. I said, I'm not interested in time, I just want to see effort. Why am I saying that? Because when you start putting time, meaning you engage them adequately.
The coach said Cheruiyot is yet to receive a COVID-19 vaccine, but is in the queue. The team live together and avoid seeing other people. They train on this track and one in Nairobi's National Park, home to lions, hyenas and rhinos.
We've zeroed our training within our vicinity. This is the track and into the national park. Luckily, the animals don't have COVID. So that's what we interact with most of the time.
25-year-old Cheruiyot needs to qualify at next month's trials to make it to the Olympics. In 2016, he failed to qualify for the Rio Games after finishing 4th, a mere half a second from making the team.
That was Nazanin Moshiri of Reuters reporting. Africa's top 7 rugby teams are in South Africa to help each other prepare for the Olympic Games. South Africa and Kenya have qualified to prepare for the Olympic Games. Zimbabwe and Uganda are also taking part in the friendly tournaments and shared preparation camps currently taking place in South Africa. They still stand a chance to qualify in the Olympic repechage, which is due to take place in Monaco on the 19th and 20th of June.
So we are happy with how the team is progressing towards the Olympics, as we still have 3 more tournaments next week and 2 more tournaments in LA. So we hope by the time we at LA, we'll have all the systems will be working.
That's why we've traveled thousands of miles to come here and have a feel of tough rugby. Just to make sure that we're in the right frame of mind and right frame physically to be able to compete at the highest level.
Coming from a long period of no rugby, it's exactly what we wanted. The Solidarity Camp is just an incredible opportunity for us to bring together a big group of players and build through 2 weekends. 12 games is an awesome opportunity to build and step up each game and hopefully get better and better.
Meanwhile, the postponed Women's 2021 Rugby World Cup will now be held in New Zealand from October 8th to November 12th, 2022, according to a statement by the sport's global governing body. The tournament was originally scheduled for September and October this year, but was postponed in March until 2022 due to uncertainties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. After dark months struggling with the coronavirus pandemic, Europe is finally hitting its stride with vaccinations and economies picking up and countries emerging from lockdowns and reopening their borders to foreign tourists. But as Lisa Brandt reports from Paris, there is still a lot of uncertainty.
For this vegetarian restaurant, the journey under France's lockdown has been tough. But Maison Nomade is finally reopening. Staff idled by the pandemic are scrambling.
We're very excited, a little bit stressed, and we're looking forward to open the restaurant again and hope this time it will last forever. And we won't have to close again because it's been hard.
That's a sentiment shared by many other French businesses as coronavirus restrictions start easing. Next Wednesday, outdoor terraces of restaurants and bars are reopening for the first time in months, although at half capacity, along with museums and shops. Other European countries are reopening even faster, sparking celebrations in Spain and preparations in Greece to welcome vaccinated international tourists starting Saturday. That's a big change from earlier this year, as countries like the United States and Britain ramped up their vaccination campaigns and saw COVID-19 cases fall. Experts say the numbers in the European Union kept climbing. Vaccine delivery delays left EU governments struggling to inoculate citizens and sometimes fighting over supplies. The 19-member Eurozone slipped into double-dip recession. With the vaccine bottleneck now easing, Brussels predicts it will meet its goal of inoculating 70% of European adults this summer. EU economic growth forecasts are also rosier, at 4.2% this year, up from previous estimates.
But now things are looking better. The economy is opening up. This has been partly a consequence of the acceleration of the vaccine drive, but also because some Mediterranean states in particular have been pushing very hard to get tourism back on track.
The EU hopes to facilitate travel within the bloc through special COVID-19 certificates for citizens who are vaccinated or test negative to the virus. France's international borders are set to reopen June 9th, but recuperating its spot as the world's leading tourist destination may take time. The Paris area alone lost 33 million visitors last year, more than 2/3 of its usual numbers.
Tourists will come back. I don't know how many and how much time, but at the end, the Eiffel Tower always attracts. But the big issue is going to be the business travelers. And why should they choose Paris rather than London or Berlin or Milan or whatever? And that's the issue.
His message to tourists: France is a safe destination. People here are hoping that stays true. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Paris.
Coming up, the ongoing migrant influx at the U.S. southern border. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa. After 29 years on air, Shaka Sali is retiring.
From the deepest, better part of the bottom of my Kavale heart.
Join him on his last show where he talks about his life and career and passes on the baton to Haiti Adams, the host who will lead the new Straight Talk Africa.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Inspired by the verdict in the George Floyd murder case, relatives of other alleged police brutality victims in the U.S. want their cases reopened. It's not so clear-cut. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias looks at the complexities of their quest to seek justice. Be advised that this report contains language and video that some might find disturbing.
A few steps from where Tracy and her brother Paul stand, their sibling Leonard Shand was gunned down by police on September 26, 2019. The family's lawyer gave VOA videos he obtained from the authorities. They show an almost 40-minute standoff with 10 officers of 3 departments in Prince George's County, Maryland. They demanded that Shand drop 2 knives. Shand's family says police used excessive force and inflamed the scenario that ultimately led to his shooting death.
They killed him before the crisis intervention showed up. He didn't trust cops, so it would have made an absolute difference. And you got to remember, he wasn't hostile all the time. He got hostile when they tried to hit him with the vehicle. He got hostile when they tried to kick him in his back.
In the United States, the justice system handles cases of alleged police brutality as criminal or civil matters, sometimes both. Because it is the police who investigate crimes, there's an automatic conflict of interest.
The victim's family is able to bring civil charges to that officer, against that officer, relating to any types of victimization that that individual and their family member suffered. Now, with regards to criminal charges, that has to be brought on by the government. The controversy is that prosecutors are so used to working with law enforcement. They depend on law enforcement to provide them with that evidence.
Then there is transparency. In Maryland and most states, a grand jury, that's a panel of ordinary citizens, reviews the evidence from police and prosecutors to decide if cops should be charged.
The problem with the grand jury is it is secret. It happens behind closed doors with one prosecutor and no other lawyer for the victim. We don't even know what charges were suggested.
The grand jury voted not to charge the officers involved in Shand's shooting. The prosecutor called the process thorough and transparent and said she isn't open to reviewing it.
The use of force expert looked at every single angle, reviewed every piece of video footage, reviewed every witness statement, and applied the law.
The Fraternal Order of Police Union has pushed back on the nationwide drive to reopen cases, including Shand's.
I guess I would just be fearful that you could reopen and keep cases open indefinitely until you got the answer that you wanted to get. And that's not how our justice system works.
There's been political pressure on some high-profile cases, like the 2014 shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland, and the 2015 death of Freddie Gray of spine injuries after his arrest in Baltimore.
Even when an officer is not indicted, it still doesn't mean that people didn't find what happened to be egregious. And oftentimes in civil court is where we see the shift.
Settlement of civil misconduct cases is paid by states, cities, and counties with insurance and/or taxpayer money. What's called, quote, qualified immunity, unquote, shields individual officers from personal financial responsibility for actions on duty.
That's something that is very controversial. That's an issue that's not only being taken up at the state and local level, but also nationally.
Legislation repealing qualified immunity passed the U.S. House in March. Brave Boy said her county is improving police training while beefing up mental health units. And she welcomed the police reform package Maryland recently passed. Leonard Shand's siblings know there's little chance of getting a new criminal investigation and are hoping to find justice through an ongoing civil lawsuit. But they know it can never be complete. Money, if they get any, won't bring Leonard back.
This is a human life. So, I mean, what compensation, could there be? I feel heartache because I know what he wanted to do and what he was currently in the process of doing with his life. And now it's just cut down, and that's a horrible, horrible thing.
Veronica Valderas Iglesias for VOA News, Prince George's County, Maryland.
A top immigration official pledged a comprehensive response to the influx of unaccompanied minors at the U.S.-Mexico border Thursday. In testimony on the Capitol Hill, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told concerned lawmakers a migrant crisis early in the Biden presidency has been contained. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden renews his push for immigration reform Friday with a White House meeting with recipients of DACA, a program providing legal status to undocumented immigrants brought to the United States as children. A renewal of that program, broadly popular with the American public, passed the U.S. House earlier this year and is now stalled in the evenly divided Senate. Senate Republicans say the Biden administration has a crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border.
The crisis today is unprecedented, far worse than it was last year, and even substantially worse than 2019, when everyone considered it a crisis.
The administration pushed back Thursday, saying that was the result of Trump-era immigration policies.
We are dedicated to an orderly, safe, and humane immigration system. And therefore, we stopped the prior administration's policy of expelling the unaccompanied children. We did not turn them away.
The number of unaccompanied minors at the border has fallen to fewer than 500 this week.
In March, there were more than 5,000 children who were in Border Patrol custody specifically, each spending an average 115 hours in Border Patrol facilities. But as of this last Tuesday, I understand there's 455 children in Border Patrol custody, each spending an average of 28 hours in those facilities. That's a dramatic decrease in both the number of children in custody and the time spent in Border Patrol custody.
Apprehensions of adults at the U.S.-Mexico border have risen, but that number reflects undocumented adults' repeated attempts to cross. Vice President Kamala Harris has been tasked with solving some of the root problems of migration, a mission Republicans say will not be enough.
We can't solve all the problems of the world, let alone the problems in Latin America and the problems here in our country. Do you agree with this, that we have to focus on enforcing our border, finishing the border barrier, using the technology? By the way, if it's technology, use technology, but somehow deal with this in an urgent and aggressive manner.
Senator, we are indeed focused on securing our border and, in fact, using technology as the most effective or one of the most effective ways of doing it, number one.
Increased funding for border security would likely be part of any deal worked out to pass Democratic lawmakers' sweeping immigration reform proposal introduced earlier this year. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
NASA shares the sound of its Mars helicopter, plus space debris, triggers a verbal sparring match, and an asteroid sample is heading to Earth. VOA Sarashar Basadi has the week in space.
The week started with NASA's Ingenuity helicopter humming above the Martian surface. The space agency released this video captured by its rover Perseverance just before Ingenuity took its fifth flight, where for the first time it landed somewhere different than its launch pad. The tests complete Ingenuity's first phase, opening the door for the rover to start hunting for rocks and clues from the past about life on Mars. This video comes from Chinese state television, and VOA cannot independently verify its contents, but it claims to show the rocket that sparked an international war of words. It launched in April carrying a module for the space station China is constructing. But last week it fell back to Earth in what the U.S. military called an uncontrolled re-entry. Former U.S. Senator and new NASA Administrator Bill Nelson criticized China and recalled another time when China's actions in space could have threatened lives on Earth.
This senator was one of the most vocal years ago when China did their ASAT test that blew one of their old satellites to smithereens and put tens of thousands of pieces of debris. And it was like crickets. Where was the objection? Well, this senator was on the floor of the Senate, raising Cain.
And while the U.S. controls its falling debris to ensure it lands in unpopulated areas, the Chinese allow the rocket debris to fall at random. Despite the two different approaches, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs claims there is a double standard.
When an American rocket fell on a farm in the U.S., American media used romantic rhetoric like shooting stars lighting up the night sky and dazzling light show to describe it. But when it comes to the Chinese side, it's a completely different approach.
Skygazers in Jordan captured these videos of the debris falling from the rocket. Chinese state media reported the rocket landed Sunday just west of the Maldives, and the government plans 10 more launches of rockets carrying parts of its space station. In other news, a 2016 mission to collect samples from the asteroid Bennu is heading home. The OSIRIS-REx mission and spacecraft reached Bennu in 2018 and spent 2 years tagging along before gathering rubble from the surface last October. The 200 to 400 grams it collected are the biggest cosmic haul for the U.S. since Apollo astronauts brought back rocks from the moon. The trip home to Earth will take OSIRIS-REx 2 years. Finally this week, NASA's James Webb Space Telescope may at last see the stars. Originally scheduled to launch more than a decade ago, it suffered countless setbacks, plus a year lost to the pandemic. Webb is NASA's successor to the Hubble Space Telescope, and designers built it to look farther into space and further back in time than any other spacecraft. Officials set a launch date for Halloween. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch